Well, it's that magical time of the year again where the year is wrapping up and everybody's talking about their favorite games of the year. What were some of their highlights, low points, some hidden gems, etc. And not only are people talking about the best game of this year, 2025, but oftentimes they'll talk about the best games of every year, or what some of their favorites have been throughout the years. Thankfully, we have an entire award show dedicated to this called The Game Awards. If you're unfamiliar with the Game Awards, well, it's that award show hosted by Geoff Keighley, where they really celebrate some of the best games of every year. Obviously, the Game Awards is just one media outlet, it's just one publication. There are hundreds, if not dozens, of other outlets that do their own Game Awards, but when it comes to notoriety and clout, it doesn't get any bigger than the Game Awards. The one with the most advertisements, announcements, and just hype behind it is Geoff's show. While it did exist before 2014, it really found its groove and started gaining a lot more notoriety from the 2014 incarnation and on. And so for today's video, I thought I would rank all of the games that have won Game of the Year from the Game Awards, from worst to best. So that's the last 11 winners and the game that I think is going to win Game of the Year this year. I have actually played all of these games and enjoy all of them as well. And even though I'm calling this video worst to best, there's not a bad game here. Far from it, actually. It's just least good to good, I guess. And all of this is based off of my own personal experience with these games. This is my own opinion, not what like Metacritic says. There might be some hot takes here, some cold takes. Feel free to let me know down below. I know that when I'm talking about no hyperbole, some of the greatest video games of all time, people are probably going to disagree. It doesn't really matter the order I put these games in, you're probably going to disagree. So you know what, just let me know down below what your order would look like. Making this list was pretty damn difficult since these are all great games, but I'll be taking a quick look at each of these games and seeing if they should have won Game of the Year for that year. I'll also be looking at what other games were nominated, and of course throwing some tubular flair into it. If you've been following me for a while, you might remember that I did this video a couple years ago, but my opinions have since changed and there's been more Game of the Year winners. But hey, if you haven't been following me for a while, now's a great time to start. I'm totally Tubular Jonathan. We're gonna be talking about some amazing games here. Hope you enjoy the video. All the support is truly greatly appreciated. Let's get into it. So of all the games that have won Game of the Year, I think the weakest is Overwatch, which won Game of the Year in 2016. I think Overwatch is the weakest just kind of by default, since the game that actually won Game of the Year does not exist anymore. For the two people that still don't know, the original Overwatch was actually shut down and delisted. It was replaced by Overwatch 2, which very much did not win Game of the Year. That original game is just completely unplayable in the modern day, which is a real shame. Obviously, Overwatch 2 is pretty similar to the original, but it just did not hit like the original did. I know it's been about 10 years and it's pretty easy to forget, but in 2016, Overwatch was the shit. People were, including myself, just going nuts for this game. It was easily their most played game of the year and one of the best experiences you could have in 2016. It was so much fun. I remember staying up well past 6 or 7 in the morning just playing this game all night because of how much fun it was. And it is genuinely some of the most fun I've ever had with a video game, and I'll always cherish those memories, but it really is a shame to see how far Overwatch has fallen since then. Some poorly received business decisions and updates, and unnecessary sequel. Yeah, Activision Blizzard just kind of shit the bed when it comes to Overwatch. You could say we all overwatched the series' downfall. Get it?
To shut the fuck up!
Okay, crummy joke aside, they really were just unable to maintain the momentum that got started in 2016, but what was Overwatch up against? What were the other games nominated for Game of the Year? Well, there were some pretty good ones here. The other games nominated were Doom, that's the 2016 game, Inside, Titanfall 2, and Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. Now, outside of Inside, I think you can make a case for any of these games winning Game of the Year, and I still think it's impressive that Overwatch actually won over some of these. Like, Doom 2016 is maybe the most beloved game in the entire series. Titanfall 2 is still very well regarded today, and Uncharted 4: A Thief's End is maybe the best in the entire series. All of these are solid titles, but I think if we turn the clock back, get our time capsule with our Wendy's spicy nuggets and not shit ourselves, I think that of all of these games, yeah, Overwatch was the right pick. And if you asked me what my Game of the Year was in 2016, I probably would have said Overwatch as well. Nowadays, I'm not saying Overwatch, I'd probably say Doom, but that's what happens when time passes, and as we know, time is very much a bully. But hey, in 2016, Overwatch, it was fire. And so here we have Dragon Age Inquisition, which won the inaugural Game Awards show in 2014. Obviously, there was the Game Awards on Spike, but 2014 was the first year it was done under this brand, done under this format, and hosted by Geoff, yada yada yada, you already know. But the first Game of the Year recipient was Dragon Age Inquisition. Now, I very much remember watching these Game Awards back in 2014 and just being kind of perplexed that Dragon Age Inquisition won, going, I think I played better games than Inquisition this year. And honestly, that feeling still hasn't left me all these years later. Like, don't get it twisted, I think Dragon Age Inquisition is a pretty good RPG, and it's way better than what we got in 2024 with Veilguard, but Game of the Year? Really? I don't know about that one. Personally, I wouldn't even say it was my favorite RPG of that year. I would say that Dragon Age Inquisition is my favorite of the Dragon Age series, and that's not even saying much since I've never even tried the original Dragon Age, and Inquisition didn't hit hard for me like other BioWare titles have, such as Mass Effect 2 and 3. I think it's got a decent story, some good characters, and the combat is more than serviceable, but I just never fell in love with it, and I never really clicked with it either. I always thought it was just good, as opposed to great. Maybe if I played through it again today, I would feel differently, but as things stand, yeah, that's my stance. So what was it up against? Well, it was actually up against Bayonetta 2, Dark Souls 2, Hearthstone, and Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. Now, Bayonetta 2, I actually would take over Dragon Age Inquisition. I think that's the best of the Bayonetta series, and I think it's an excellent hack and slash. Dark Souls 2, I would probably also take this over Dragon Age Inquisition. I know a lot of people don't like Dark Souls 2. I still think it's pretty good. Hearthstone, I've never really been big on. I'm just not a huge card game guy, but I can't deny its impact and legacy that it left, and in 2014, it certainly was pretty hype. I would actually take Inquisition over that one. And then Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor, you know, I think this is a good game, but I'm kind of surprised it was nominated for Game of the Year. I didn't think it was that good. You know what should have been nominated for Game of the Year, and what I think is better than Dragon Age Inquisition, is Mario Kart 8, Smash Bros. For Wii U, and South Park: Stick of Truth. South Park: Stick of Truth was easily my favorite RPG of the year, and it's one of my favorite games of all time, but it wasn't even in the conversation. It wasn't even nominated for Game of the Year, which just goes to show that, again, this is just one outlet, and it's not the definitive Game of the Year. That simply just doesn't exist. At the end of the day, Dragon Age Inquisition won, and while I think it's a good game, and I can recommend it, outside of Overwatch, I think it's the weakest of all the games that have won Game of the Year. And so here we have It Takes Two, which won Game of the Year in 2021. Now, I was pretty surprised that It Takes Two actually won Game of the Year, but it had a very feel-good story to it. The game's director, Joseph Fares, had shown up on the Game Awards show a few times, just kind of being a crazy cokehead goofball spouting nonsense about his upcoming game, but then to actually see his game win Game of the Year, oh yeah, it was awesome. And I am absolutely not denying that It Takes Two has quality, it's just this is not the type of game that traditionally wins Game of the Year, if we're being real here. It doesn't exactly fit the mold, but you know what, that honestly makes it all the better. I thought this game was a whole lot of fun and is genuinely one of the best cooperative experiences I've ever had in gaming. There's so much variety. The game is constantly mixing things up and keeping things engaging and interesting. The controls are really solid. There's tons of amazing set pieces. The story, while basic, still gets the job done, and there are plenty of moments in this game that still live rent-free in my head to this day. The game was incredibly creative, imaginative, and even innovative in some aspects. Since then, Joseph and Hazelight Studios have actually released their next game, Split Fiction, which I think might even be better than It Takes Two, which is really saying something. But what was It Takes Two up against? Well, it was up against Deathloop, Metroid Dread, Psychonauts 2, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and Resident Evil Village. Now, before It Takes Two had won, if you had asked me to predict which game I thought was going to win Game of the Year, I would have said Deathloop. That just seems like the kind of game that would win Game of the Year. It was not my personal Game of the Year, that was just what I predicted. I was obviously wrong, and I was happy to be wrong. As while I think Deathloop is good, I don't think it's Game of the Year. Metroid Dread, that's a pretty good one also. And I remember there were plenty of people who were surprised that a 2D game is nominated for Game of the Year. Well, don't tell them about Silksong. Psychonauts 2, that was my personal Game of the Year. That was my favorite experience all year, and I thought it was a fantastic game. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, I obviously got that history with Insomniac, but I'll be the first to say that I don't even think this is one of the best Ratchet & Clank games. But hey, it's good to see 3 3D platformers nominated for Game of the Year. And then Resident Evil Village, I think this one is pretty good too. I don't think it's one of the strongest Resident Evils, but it was one of the best experiences I had that year, and it was pretty scary. Either way, there were some more than solid choices in 2021, and I think the right game won. And it's arguably the most wholesome story of the Game Awards. Let's go, Joseph. I'm bummed Split Fiction isn't nominated for Game of the Year, but hey, Joseph got his dub. So now we got The Last of Us Part 2, which won Game of the Year in 2020. Now, I remember being a bit surprised that Last of Us won Game of the Year, but looking back, I really shouldn't have been surprised at all. This very much is the type of game that was designed to be Game of the Year, where it tells a really gripping, emotional story, and it's very graphically impressive. And while the gameplay might not exactly be top tier, it doesn't really matter all that much since the game's themes, characters, and moments are so impactful that it just kind of overrides a lot of criticism leveraged at this game. Look, a lot of people have made very, very long videos saying they either love the game or hate the game. That's not really a discussion we need to get into today. I enjoy the game, but I do have my issues with it. I don't love the story, particularly the second half. I think the pacing isn't all that great. The game just goes on way too long, and while I think the gameplay is good, I don't know if it's good enough to hold the entire game up for 20 to 25 hours. Still though, I'll be the first to admit it does have some of the most shocking moments I've ever seen in a game, and it absolutely does pull at the heartstrings, which is clearly what it was designed to do. And you might be going, so why were you surprised at all that The Last of Us Part 2 won Game of the Year? It seems like a shoo-in. Because of what it was up against. 2020 was actually a pretty freaking good year when it came to video games releasing. Obviously, there was a ton of bad shit that happened, but the games that came out that year, there was some fire here. It was up against Animal Crossing New Horizons, Doom Eternal, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Ghost of Tsushima, and Hades. Now, this will probably sound like a bit of a hot take, but I would honestly take all of those games above The Last of Us Part 2. I enjoy The Last of Us Part 2, but legit, Animal Crossing New Horizons, I love that game. Maybe it's not the best Animal Crossing game ever, but I think it's pretty great. Doom Eternal is one of the best first-person shooters of the 2020s and low-key reinvented the entire genre again. I think the Final Fantasy VII Remake is still excellent, even with its slow-ass pacing. Ghost of Tsushima, I mean, that's just a great game in general, with its own good story, and it has one of the best open worlds of the 2020s. And then Hades, I mean, Hades is like maybe the best roguelike ever made, straight up. So yeah, that's why I would take all of them over The Last of Us Part 2, but that's the game that won, and while I think it's good, it's obviously not my favorite. But I know speaking on this game shit, even just thinking about this game is going to get all the keyboard warriors out here, so come on out, let's see ya. What wonderful takes do you have for me today? I'll be waiting. And then here we got another Sony game with God of War, which won Game of the Year in 2018. Similar to Last of Us, this very much does feel like the game that was designed to win Game of the Year, where it tells a really gripping, emotional story that has arguably some of the most legendary moments of any video game. It was a huge departure for the God of War series. I mean, all of the ones before it were straight hack and slashes. Kratos wasn't exactly the most likable guy, and they really favored these large-scale spectacles over everything else. God of War 2018 was very different. It was a hell of a lot more cinematic, feeling more like a movie at times, almost replicating what The Last of Us had done years prior, and really what almost every Sony game follows nowadays. The entire game is actually one camera shot, which I still think is impressive to this day, and I think it does tell a good story. They made Kratos a really sympathetic character who has more depth and complexity and emotional maturity than all of the prior games combined, if we're being real here. And he goes on this big epic journey with his son, and seeing their bond strengthen and mature is quite satisfying to watch, and I like it. And it really is the game's story that really got it Game of the Year, because it's probably not the gameplay. While I think the gameplay is good here, it's not my favorite of the God of War series, far from it actually. While the axe feels amazing and throwing it and catching it feels great, that's really the biggest positive of the gameplay. The game is sorely lacking in enemy variety, combat complexity, and depth overall, and even though there are some really great boss fights here, I wish there was more of them. The level design is also just kind of whatever, and the camera zoomed way too in for my liking. And I think that the game's sequel, Ragnarok, actually really addresses this game's issues. I will say though, the game is an absolute looker. It still is a stunning looking video game, and is maybe the best looking PS4 game of them all, with Ghost of Tsushima. But what was God of War up against in 2018? Well, it was up against Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Celeste, Marvel's Spider-Man, Monster Hunter World, and Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, I was shocked, I'm pretty sure like everybody was shocked, that Red Dead Redemption 2 just didn't immediately win Game of the Year. It seemed like the obvious choice. I'm still surprised to this day it didn't win Game of the Year. I think Red Dead Redemption 2 is better, and is one of the greatest games from the 2010s, but it somehow did not win Game of the Year. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I have no idea how the fuck this got nominated. They must have been using the time savers or something. I would never nominate this for Game of the Year. This is one of my least favorite Assassin's Creeds. Celeste, yeah, that's a pretty good one. I got nothing but good things to say about that. Marvel Spider-Man, another one by Insomniac Games, and I kinda like it more than God of War 2018, but that might be a bit of a hot take. And then Monster Hunter World, yeah, that was a great game. That's like the best in the whole Monster Hunter series, and it really propelled the entire series forward. Of these choices, do I think God of War was the right one? No, I'm still going with Red Dead Redemption 2. But we aren't in the timeline where RDR2 won Game of the Year, so yeah, that's that. And then, ooh, this is probably a hot take, but we have Breath of the Wild here, which won Game of the Year in 2017. Now, Breath of the Wild's impact on gaming as a whole cannot be understated. It was a huge moment for not only Nintendo as a company, but the medium of video games in general. There have been many games to take inspiration from Breath of the Wild and what it did. The amount of freedom that this game gave players really was unprecedented at the time. Like, there is so many ways to approach just about every single puzzle or problem in the game, and the game lets you do pretty much whatever the hell you want. If you want to go fight Ganon immediately, go ahead and do it. If you want to explore around, check out all of the shrines and towns, the game absolutely encourages that as well. It really is all about the player choice. And the game very quickly made the Switch a must-own system. Like, this was a legit actual system seller. And it was one of the key reasons I got the Switch myself, because it just looked absolutely incredible. And all these years later, I still think Breath of the Wild is pretty great. I do prefer Tears of the Kingdom, which I realize might be a little bit of a hot take these days, but there are still more than enough reasons to play through Breath of the Wild if you haven't. There's even a Switch 2 version of it now, and it's not hard to see why so many people absolutely love the game. So you might be wondering why it's placed where it is. Well, I've never really liked the story to this game, if we're being honest, and I just think the other games are a little bit better. Simple as that. But 2017 was actually a pretty good year for gaming. What else was it up against? It was up against Horizon Zero Dawn, Lamau, Persona 5, PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, and Super Mario Odyssey. Now, Horizon Zero Dawn, I think that's a pretty good game, but I don't think it's better than Breath of the Wild. I actually think Forbidden West is quite a bit better than Zero Dawn. Persona 5, oh, I absolutely love Persona 5. This is like one of my favorite games of all time. I actually do prefer it over Breath of the Wild. PUBG, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, being nominated is still one of the funniest things ever. The game wasn't even out yet. It was still in early access when it was nominated for Game of the Year, and yeah, I don't think it was that good. And then Super Mario Odyssey. I love Super Mario Odyssey. I honestly love it more than Breath of the Wild, but I've always preferred Mario over Zelda, so there likely is a bit of a bias here. I still think Breath of the Wild is a fantastic game, but me personally, I probably would have gone with Persona 5 or Mario Odyssey. But I don't think anybody can deny the legacy that Breath of the Wild left behind. I mean, nearly every Nintendo game, it feels like, since then has taken something from Breath of the Wild. It was just a monumental moment in Nintendo's history, and really when they came back after the flop that was the Wii U, which, funny enough, this game was on, but it seems like everybody's forgotten that, myself included. So here we got a bit more of a recent one with Astro Bot, which won Game of the Year in 2024. Like It Takes Two, I was a bit surprised that this one won Game of the Year, and not because it's not a great game. Oh, it absolutely is a great game, and I would argue that it's like the best 3D platformer of the 2020s, but at the same time, it's a 3D platformer that focuses on intricate level design and collecting things, which historically has never really been the type of game to win Game of the Year. But you know what? I'm so glad that it did, because Astro Bot has so many great things to it. The controls are fantastic. Astro controls like a dream. The levels are some of the most creative, unique, and engaging levels you'll find in any 3D platformer. Sure, at times it might feel a little derivative of Mario, but I think the game still does an excellent job creating its own identity and thrilling moments. And I love the game's collectibles, these bots, and the many references to other, not only PlayStation icons, but video games in general, was just a sight to behold. I absolutely loved collecting all of these bots, and it's one of the few games I've actually 100%ed, at least in the last few years. The game looks absolutely exceptional, and the soundtrack is pretty great as well. Like, it's a kick-ass 3D platformer that I think is worth anybody's time, especially if you enjoy the genre. But it was up against some heavy hitters as well. So what was it up against? The other nominees were Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Metaphor ReFantazio. All pretty great games. Balatro is one of my favorite games of all time, and it's maybe the best card game like ever made, in my opinion. Like, it is just such a good game through and through. Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is one of the greatest DLCs or expansions to any video game. I'm still not a fan of a DLC being nominated for Game of the Year, especially one that requires the base game, but it was nominated. Thankfully it didn't win. And then Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I mean, this is a phenomenal game. It's better than the Final Fantasy VII Remake in my opinion, and I still can't believe it's real with just how good it is. And then Metaphor ReFantazio is one of the best JRPGs of the last decade, easy. Oh yeah, and then there was Black Myth Wukong, which I thought was a pretty solid action game, but Game of the Year, I just never saw it. But I also understand just how wildly popular Black Myth Wukong was, especially outside of America. It was like the most sold game of last year. But to me, personally, I thought the game was just pretty good. Of all of these games, if you asked me which one I thought was going to win Game of the Year, I probably would have gone with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth just because it tells an amazing story, the presentation's excellent, and just how many incredible moments it has. But I am glad that Astrobot did win. My personal Game of the Year wasn't even nominated, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, but I do have a bit of a bias there. Either way, Astrobot's a really good one that I have no problem recommending. So here we got Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, which won Game of the Year in 2019. I remember being a little surprised that Sekiro won, but looking back, I really shouldn't have been. Sekiro has really gone on to leave a lasting legacy when it comes to video games as a whole, and its impact can also not be understated. Sure, there were plenty of games with swords before, there were plenty of games where you could parry and counter and do all of these other fancy tricks, but Sekiro really changed the game, and most games that have a parry mechanic, which feels like most games these days, took something from Sekiro. It just has arguably the best swordplay of any video game. Even all these years later, it is still unmatched. Funny enough, the first time I ever played Sekiro, I remember not enjoying it all that much. I didn't like that it forced you into one playstyle as opposed to Dark Souls where there were many different playstyles. But then I came back to and was like, you know what, let's try out the playstyle. Oh, it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. This game is supremely satisfying. It feels abso-frickin-lutely incredible. This game goes foolish. It is absolute fire. It is gas. The parry is unmatched. The swordplay in general is unmatched. It's so quick. It's fast. It's incredibly impactful. And of course, it's hard as balls. It is an immensely challenging game. Sekiro is going to kick your ass. It's going to wipe the floor with you, and it's one of the hardest games I've ever played. But the game gives you more than enough tools to whip its ass also, and it rewards you for that. It wants you to play super aggressive and be on their ass. And it all comes together to create one of the greatest gameplay loops I've ever seen in a game. It also has some of the best bosses of like any video game. It has some of the best bosses From Software has ever made, and that really is saying something. The level design is great, and the game has too many legendary moments to count. While I might not be in love with the game's story, and there were plenty of moments where I wanted to pull my hair out, I probably did, and that's why I had to get the hair transplant, I still love this game to pieces. So what was it up against in 2019? Well, it was actually up against Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which came out in 2018, but it came out too late in the year, so they included it in the 2019 Game Awards. I absolutely love Smash Ultimate. That's like one of my favorite games ever, and it's one of the few games I would actually choose above Sekiro, but that's neither here nor there. We're in the reality where Sekiro won. It was also up against Control, Death Stranding, the Resident Evil 2 remake, and The Outer Worlds. Now, I think Control is a pretty good game, but Game of the Year, I don't know about that one. I wouldn't even say that it's Remedy's best, and I did have a few issues with it. Death Stranding, it very much is not a game for everybody, but I quite enjoyed the first Death Stranding. The Resident Evil 2 remake, I mean, everybody knows just how gas this one is. The RE2 remake just went straight foolish. It's one of the greatest remakes of all time, and it's also a game I would put up there with Sekiro in terms of quality. And then The Outer Worlds, yeah, this one got nominated, but it's not one that I necessarily agree with. I think the game was just very alright. At the end of the day, I think that they absolutely did make the right decision here. I think Sekiro has gone on to be just an absolute fan favorite, and I think that's why there's a lot of people really clamoring for a sequel at this point, myself included. I would love to see a Sekiro sequel because this game, it was so good. And then here we have the 2025 Game of the Year. Now, as I'm recording this video, it has not been decided yet. The Game Awards have not happened yet. And so I've made my prediction as to what I think will win Game of the Year and ranked it accordingly with all of these other games. Before I tell you which game that is, let's go through the nominees. So the games that are nominated for Game of the Year are Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2 On the Beach, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Hades 2, Hollow Knight Silksong, and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Now, all of these games absolutely have the reasons why they should be nominated or even win Game of the Year. I mean, Expedition 33, it has an incredible story, some great gameplay, and it has a great feel-good story behind the game's development. Death Stranding 2 On the Beach, it also has an incredible story, it looks absolutely phenomenal, and is a real improvement on the first. Donkey Kong Bonanza, oh, this game is an absolute fever dream. It is so much fun, and it has the best smashing you'll find in any game. Hades 2, a fantastic roguelike, maybe even better than the original. Hollow Knight Silksong, one of the greatest Metroidvanias ever made, and it's crazy that it's one of the few games that actually lived up to the hype. Like, the hype was monumental for Silksong. And then Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, I'm pretty surprised this was nominated for Game of the Year. I figured that, well, it's good, it's probably not going to get nominated over games like Split Fiction or Ghost of Yotei, but no, it was actually nominated, which is pretty cool. Now, of these games, which do I think is going to win? I think Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is going to win. I'd honestly be pretty surprised if any other game won. I don't even know what I would pick as second place, maybe Hollow Knight Silksong, but even then I'm not sure. Like, if it's anything outside of Expedition 33, I think the whole internet is going to be shocked, and it's not hard to see why. I mean, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is absolutely phenomenal. It has one of the best battle systems I've seen in a turn-based RPG. The story is just immensely emotional and gripping, and the first few hours of this game are just absolutely incredible. They are some of the best first few hours I've seen to any game. On top of this, the game looks absolutely phenomenal, especially with it being more on the AA side. It has excellent pacing, the soundtrack is truly phenomenal. Like, this game has so much going for it, and it's maybe my favorite experience all year as well. I mean, it's just so good. The characters are so memorable, the writing is so thoughtful and engaging, and the moments are really legendary, and I have no doubt that people are going to look back on this game very, very fondly. We all thought the game was going to be, you know, good to great, but I don't think anybody thought the game was going to be this freaking good. And it's one of those games where I have absolutely no problem recommending it. Maybe it's just recency bias. I wouldn't be surprised if it is recency bias, but this is one of the best games to come out over the last decade, and it genuinely is like one of the greatest RPGs of all time. You've all heard everybody glaze this game to death, including the Game Awards. There's never been a game to have this many nominations before, but shoot, it does kind of deserve a lot of them. The most ever? I don't know about that, but it's truly an unforgettable experience. From one major RPG to the next, here we have Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which won Game of the Year in 2015. It's hard to believe that it's really been 10 years since The Witcher 3 came out, but it's also easy to forget just how hyped up this game was. This was like maybe the most hyped up game ever at the time. I'm not even being hyperbolic. At the time, I don't know if I had ever seen a game win so many pre-release awards. It was pretty incredible, and then when the game came out, oh, it was absolutely phenomenal. And it's truly gone on to be one of my favorite games of all time, and it's honestly only gotten better with age. I remember when the game came out, there were actually a decent amount of bugs to it, but those have all been fixed. But everything else about the game, oh, it just went wild. This game has such a good story to it. The Wild Hunt were so interesting, especially since they had been teased as far back as the original game. There's a bunch of great characters. The writing is really something special here, and I would argue that there's not a single bad character here. Like, everyone has their motivation, their purpose, and it truly is all killer, no filler. And Geralt is extremely likable. I love Jerry of the River. He's one of my favorite protagonists of any RPG. The combat, while clearly is not everybody's cup of tea, as I found out from being on the internet, I still found to be pretty enjoyable and a huge step up from Witcher 2. And then I just loved how many systems this game featured. In-depth, involved systems, and it didn't overwhelm you with them either. It introduces you to them one at a time, and they all have their use. And it's not absolutely mandatory to engage with every single one of these systems. The crafting, the alchemy, and its many other role-playing systems were incredibly well done. I also love the hunts, man. The hunts were so good in this game. Hunting down these creatures and taking them down was always really engaging, especially if you went really in depth and found out their weaknesses and the best way to take on each one. Like, I found it to be incredibly engaging. I also love this game's open worlds and the pacing. The pacing is phenomenal in this game. It feels like you're doing something vastly different every few hours, which is not something I can say about a lot of open world games. And the game just goes through a few arcs that I really just couldn't get enough of. I also think the side content is some of the best you'll find in any RPG, and there's a reason why so many people love this game. And then it also has 2 amazing expansions as well. And when it comes to what was going to be Game of the Year in 2015, it was a no-brainer that it was going to be Witcher 3. But it was up against some pretty good games as well. It was up against Bloodborne, Fallout 4, Super Mario Maker, and Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. And I think all of these games are phenomenal as well. I mean, Bloodborne is one of the best games From Software has ever made, and that really is saying something. Fallout 4, while I know not everybody loves Fallout 4, I absolutely do. It's maybe my favorite Fallout game of them all with New Vegas, and I think it has a lot of great elements to it. Metal Gear Solid 5, another one that I know not everybody loves, but I absolutely loved MGS5. While I didn't care so much for the story, I thought the gameplay was something special. And then Super Mario Maker, was also a really fun time, even if Super Mario Maker 2 is way better. Either way though, I'm pretty sure everyone and their mom knew that Wild Cunt was going to win Game of the Year. And while I've heard plenty of people tell me that it's so overrated and not deserving of that, I disagree. My experience was truly something special with it, and I look back on it very fondly and absolutely love the game. And then in the number 2 spot, we have another one of my favorites with Baldur's Taint 3. Now, if you're familiar with me, you already know that I've talked about this game to pieces. I have talked it to death, but that does not matter. I will be talking about it again because I absolutely love this game. It is one of my favorite video games of all time, and in my opinion, it's one of the greatest video games of all time. I don't think role-playing games can really get much better than this, and I think it is easily, in my opinion, the greatest D&D game ever made. And it's genuinely one of my favorite experiences that I've had with any game. It's one of the few games where I've sat down for like 15 hours straight playing it because I was just having such a great time. Everything from the story, to the characters, to the companions, to the role-playing elements, to how important your background is, to the many choices the game provides you, to the incredible combat, to all of the dice rolling. Just about everything when it comes to Baldur's Taint 3 is pretty incredible. It has endless legendary memorable moments. It has so many great exchanges with the companions. The companions are just kind of goated, like straight up. There's not a bad one here, and they have so much depth and complexity that I feel like is rarely seen in video games. The game has a ton of side content that's amazing, and the combat, while not everyone's cup of tea because it's turn-based, I think does something really special, and it really feels like you're playing D&D in a video game. The game will let you be creative as hell and come up with a bunch of wacky solutions to how to defeat enemies, and usually it works. Usually the game rewards experimentation and creativity, and there were so many moments where I did something that I did not think would work under any circumstance, and it absolutely did. Stuff like dropping a chandelier on enemies, pushing them off a cliff, or feeding them to some other creature. Like, the game lets you actually come up with your own solutions to a lot of these problems, and then the game gives you so many choices when it comes to the dialogue that it feels like it's immensely replayable. You could probably play through this game 5 or 6 times, and it would be pretty different every single time. On top of that, I think the music's good, it looks nice, and the game can be played either by yourself or cooperatively. As you can see from my gameplay, I played through it cooperatively, and we had a really great time. So much so that I actually went back and played more of it by myself because I just love the game that much. But it was up against some really heavy hitters in 2023. 2023 was just such an amazing year for video games. It was up against Alan Wake 2, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Marvel's Spider-Man 2, the Resident Evil 4 remake, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder. I feel like all of these could win Game of the Year in any other year, but because it was 2023, they were all up against the titan that is Baldur's Taint 3. In my opinion, it wasn't even close. BG3 really was the best game that I played, and maybe the best game I've played in all of the 2020s. Alan Wake 2, that was a really good one. It's one of the best survival horror games of the 2020s, and while the pacing is glacial and very slow, I still think that it's one of Remedy's best, if not their best ever. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, this probably would have been a shoo-in for Game of the Year if it wasn't for the Taint 3, as it's just more Breath of the Wild, but bigger and better. Marvel's Spider-Man 2, I obviously got my history with this one. I was part of the game's development. I worked for Insomniac Games. This was like my big game, and it was all the more devastating when I got laid off in 2023 when this game released. But I still think it was pretty great and probably the best Spider-Man game ever made. Obviously, no bias there whatsoever. None, zero, zip, nada. Resident Evil 4 remake, oh, this is so good. This game, straight gas. The original game was already a beast. The RE4 remake is even better. Like, it's one of the greatest games ever made, and it would have probably been my favorite game of the year if it wasn't for Baldur's Taint 3. And then Super Mario Bros. Wonder, maybe the best 2D Mario game of them all, easily the best since like Super Mario World, and one of the most creative 2D platformers I've ever seen. There's so many amazing levels in Wonder. All of these games are great. They're all absolutely worth your time, and yeah, 2023 was a pretty kick-ass year. I remember thinking it was like the greatest year ever in gaming, and a couple years removed now, yeah, it's still pretty incredible. What's even more incredible is that a couple years later, Baldur's Taint 3 is still getting nominated for awards because it keeps getting updated and it's getting better and better. Like, how can the game get any better? I don't know. They did it though. And it's totally tubular and worth your time. And then here we have it, my number 1 pick, Elden Ring, which won Game of the Year in 2022. Honestly, I'm constantly going back and forth between Elden Ring and Baldur's Taint 3 as to which one I enjoy more and which one I think is better, but today I woke up and said, I'm in an Elden Ring mood and I'm going with Elden Ring. Like several of these other games, it was hyped to all hell, it released, and it was an actual cultural phenomenon. People were absolutely obsessed with this game, and it's not hard to see why. It's absolutely incredible by every metric. We could be here another 50 minutes glazing this game, but that wouldn't be doing it justice. It really is that good. It is one of the greatest open worlds you'll find of any video game. The combat is really great, it's super smooth, the challenge is absolutely on point, at least in my opinion. It offers a hell of a lot of variety and choice. You can have some really dynamic builds. The pacing is really solid, and it is a bit customizable since you can choose where you want to go. There's a lot of replayability. The world is super interesting, and it has maybe the greatest sense of exploration I've ever seen in a game, constantly rewarding you for going off the beaten path. And then it actually looks and runs pretty well also. But what was it up against in 2022? It was up against A Plague Tale Requiem, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Stray, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Yeah, it wasn't even close. I know there were a lot of people who were saying God of War Ragnarok was going to give it a run for its money, and yeah, I agree to a certain extent, especially as somebody who is part of the game's production, but here we are a few years later and yeah, it's not even close. Elden Ring was pretty much a shoo-in to be Game of the Year, and it released in February of that year. God of War Ragnarok has an amazing story, and I think it's way better than the first new one, the 2018 game I spoke of earlier, but it's not Elden Ring. A Plague Tale Requiem, I haven't actually played a ton of this one. Some jackass spoiled the ending for me though, and that's why I haven't really gotten around to finishing this one, but I think it was good also. It tells a good emotional story. Horizon Forbidden West, I think that's a great game. I think it's way better than the first one, and I quite enjoyed it. Stray, that's another really good one. That's one of the most impactful indie games ever, and it really brought cats into the forefront for gaming, it seems. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I also haven't played a ton of this one. It's just such a gargantuan adventure, but I know a lot of people really enjoy it. But yeah, none of them could really compete with Elden Ring. I just love Elden Ring. I really do want to go back to it. It has been some time, and there was also the DLC that I spoke of earlier. DLC is really great also. And I imagine that whenever Elden Ring 2 gets announced, if it ever gets announced, it's going to be one of the most hype moments ever in gaming. People are going to lose their shit. People lost their shit over Elden Ring's announcement and subsequent release. Can you imagine a sequel to this game? I certainly can't. Either way though, 2022 had some pretty solid games, but Elden Ring was just head and shoulders above everything else, at least in my opinion. Speaking of my opinion, that's all that this ever was. It was just my opinion. I'm just ranking these games based off of my own personal preference. I'm sure there are some people out there that would say Last of Us Part 2 was the best game of this entire list. I very much disagree, but hey, that's your list, and if you made it to this part of the video, you gotta let me know what your list looks like. You gotta let me know what your favorite game of this list is. If you do, you'll get a little heart from me. Either way, thank you so much for watching. I know I was a bit of a yapper on this one, but hey, these are some of the greatest games of all time, straight up. I got a lot to say, and yeah, that's it for today, so stay safe, y'all. Bye-bye.